Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
In last class, what did we discuss? In last class, what did we discuss about? We have discussed about irrigation. What is irrigation? Advantages, some merits, demerits, ill effects. Uh, what are the need of irrigation? All that we have studied, isn't it? So, irrigation is basically about crops. Let's discuss about various types of crops. My screen is visible. Okay, my screen is visible, I think, isn't it? So what are the different types of crops? Generally, crops are divided into wet crops. Next is number two is dry crops. Next is garden crops, summer crops, winter crops, and cash crop. Okay. So what is wet crops? Wet crops are those which lands are irrigated and then crop are cultivated. Crops are cultivated. Okay. And next is dry crops, which do not need irrigation. That means there are some types of crops which no need to do irrigation, no need to do artificially, no need to add water. Okay, these are wet crops. Next is garden crops. In garden crops, we have to irrigate throughout the year. Okay, so in garden crops, what will happen? We have to supply water, although it is rainy season, it is drought season, whatever, we have to add water artificially throughout the year, and that is your garden crops. Okay. And number two important types of crops are kharif and rabi. What is kharif crops? Those crops which are harvested in autumn, sown during southwest monsoon and harvested in autumn season. Okay, and kharif crops are also known as summer crops. Next is winter crops, rabi. Rabi crops are also called winter crops, which are sown in autumn and harvested in spring. Okay, and next one is cash crop. In cash crops are those crops which has encased in the market and it cannot be consumed directly by the cultivators. Okay, which has to be encased in the market and it cannot be consumed by the farmers. And the example of crops, here we have some examples of crops, summer crops, that is kharif, and these are rice, maize, bajra, jowar, pulses. Okay, and all of these Kharif crops are sown in June and July. In between June and July, when there is heavy rainfall, when there is water all and around in, then these are sown in spring and harvested in October, November. Rice, maize September, October, bajra September, October, jowar October, November, and pulses November to December. Next, winter season crops. Winter season crops are rabi crops, and we can classify winter season crops as wheat, barley, peas, gram, tobacco, potato. All these are rabi crops. Okay, all these are all these are rabi crops, and these are sown in October to November and harvested in March, April, May, June, February. Okay, and 8 months crop cotton. Cotton is sown in May and July, harvested in December and July. Annual crop sugarcane, February, March, December to March. So these are the different types of crops. Next is crop seasons. What are the seasons in crops? In North India, the crop season is divided as Rabi and Kharif. Rabi crops are called as winter crops and Kharif crops are called as summer crops. Kharif crops require more water than Rabi crops. Rabi starts from 1st October and on 31st March. And in Tamil Nadu crops are classified as wet crop and dry crops. Okay, crop rotation. So what is crop rotation? Let's see. Rotation of crops implies the nature of crops sown in a particular field is changed year after year. Okay, where there is a rotation in the field, different types of crops are harvested, crops are sown in a particular field. That is your crop rotation, and crop rotation is important. Why it is important? Crop rotation, necessity for rotation. Why it is necessary? The necessity for irrigation when same crop is grown again and again in the same field, the fertility of land gets reduced as the soil becomes deficient in plant foods favorable to that particular crop. Okay. Next, if different crops were to be raised, there would certainly be more balanced fooding and soil efficient in one particular type of nutrient is allowed to recoat. Crop diseases and insect pests will multiply in an alarming rate. If the same crop is to be grown continuously, rotation will check the disease. Next, leguminous crops such as gram, if introduced in rotation, it will increase the nitrogen content of soil and thus increases the fertility. Next is the deep-rooted and shallow-rooted crops in a rotation draw their food from different depth of soil. The soil will be better utilized. Rotation of crops is beneficial. Why? It is beneficial to farmers because Rotation of crops. Farmers, as there will be rotation of cash crops, fodder and soil renovating crops. Next is general rotation of crops can be summarized as wheat, grain millet, gram, rice and gram, cotton wheat gram, cotton wheat sugar cane, cotton sugar, cotton grain millet and gram. Consumption. Okay, so these are the examples of rotation of crops. Suppose in one field, in the same field, you have sown wheat. Then in the next season, you have to grow great millet and then gram. Okay, so these are the example of rotation. You can rotate the food crops like this. Next is consumptive use of water. So, what is consumptive use of water? Considerable part of water applied for irrigation is lost by evaporation and transpiration. Evaporation and transpiration, this is a rotation cycle. Okay, these two processes, being difficult to separate, are taken as one and called vapor transmission or consumptive use of water. Next is duty. So these are the important definitions. Consumptive use of water, duty, delta. These are very important. Okay, duty and delta. And consumptive use of water, it is a particular part of water applied for irrigation is lost by evaporation and transpiration. Okay, and these two processes, these two means evaporation and transpiration, these two processes are difficult to separate and called vapor transpiration or consumptive use of water. Okay, next is duty. What is duty? Duty is the area of crop irrigated, or it is volume of water required. Okay, sorry, area of crop irrigated by volume of water required. Okay, the duty is basically the field, the area where you are going to irrigate the crop. Next is delta. So what is delta? The depth of water required for every time generally varies depending upon the type of the crop. So delta is the definition of delta is like this. It is the depth of water required every time generally varies depending upon the type of the crop. Okay, remember these definitions. The total depth, or you can say delta, is the total depth of water required for a crop to nature is called delta. Crop period, the time from the instant of its sowing to instant harvesting. Base period, time between the first supply water to the land and last watering before harvesting. And there are some factors which affects duty. This is also an important point, factors affecting duty. And number one is soil moisture, topography, nature of rainfall, nature of crop irrigated, method of cultivation, season of crop, system of irrigation. Okay, so what is soil moisture? In clay soil, less water is required since its retentive capacity is more. Why? Because in clay soil there is already lots of water. Okay, so no need to irrigate. That means the retention PV capacity is more. And this affects duty. Previous soil, it will be more. Topography. Uniform distribution depends on topography. So duty is generally affected by the topography. If there is a slope, then it will have to, we have to irrigate more, we have to apply water more than that of flat portion, isn't it? As water requirement is increase. Next is nature of rainfall. If rainfall is high over the crop period, water requirement becomes less. Otherwise, it will be more. So, whatever I have given to you, is that clear? What is duty? What is delta? Types of crops, Rabi and Kharif crops, the two main crops which we have cultivated in India. And nature of rainfall, if rainfall is high over the crop period, water requirement becomes less. Otherwise, it will be more. Next is nature of crop irrigated. Dry crop requires less water, whereas wet crop require more water. Isn't it? Is that clear? How nature of crop irrigated is affected duty? Nature of crop irrigated means what? Dry crops and wet, not wet crops. It should be wet. Wet. Whereas wet crops requires more water. Isn't it? Nature of crops irrigated. Dry crop required less water, whereas wet crop required more water. Nature of crop irrigated. And next is method of cultivation. There are various method of cultivation, isn't it? If the fields are properly plowed, it will have high retentive capacity and the number of watering are reduced. Next is season of crop. Less irrigation water is required for rainy season crop. In rainy season crop and a duty increased. Okay. Next is if the crop grown in summer, who is left the meeting? Some Fevna Bosmotari. While living, some of the crop grown in summer, more irrigation water is required and the duty gets decreased. Let me do one thing. Just wait a minute. So what are the next is method of cultivation. Well, who is going to leave? Oh, my screen is visible or not? I have not seen your message. Now it is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So someone has messaged me. Cannot see the screen. Okay. And next is season of crop. Oh, sorry. Number 5 is method of cultivation. So, what are the method of cultivation? If the fields are properly prepared for cultivation, then it will have high retentive capacity and the number of watering are reduced. Next is season of crop. Less irrigation water is required for any season crop and therefore the duty is increased. Next, if the crop grown in summer, more irrigation water is required and the duty gets decreased. Next, system of irrigation. In perennial irrigation, continuous supply of water is given and hence water table is kept high and percolation losses is minimized. Next, in inundation type of wastage is more by deep percolation. And next is canal condition. Well maintained canal will have more duty as the losses is less. Improving duty. So there are some methods by which we can improve duty. Okay. Number one is the water losses can be reduced by having the irrigated area nearer to the head of the canal. Number two, evaporation losses can be minimized by using water as quickly as possible. Next, water losses can be minimized by lining the canal. So there is a method which is called lining of canals, and I will give you later when we will go depth chapter lining of canals. There are various methods of lining the canals. Okay, canals some chemical layers are given in the sides of the canal so that water losses can be minimized. Next is the cultivator should be trained to use water economically without wasting. The soil properties should be studied by establishing research stations in villages. Next is crop period or base period. And after that we have some numerical problems of duty and delta. Crop period and base period. What is crop period? The definition, it is also important. Definitions are important. Crop period and base period. The time period that elapses from the instant of its sowing to the instant of its harvesting is called crop period. Next is the time between the first watering. Remember this point. The time between the first watering of a crop at the time of sowing to its last watering before harvesting is called base period. These are the two important definitions, crop period and base period. Okay. What is crop period? It is the time period from the instant of its sowing to the instant of its harvesting. That is a crop period. That is entire period from the sowing to the harvesting. That period is called crop period. And next is base period. The time between the first watering of a crop. Suppose you have sowing some uh, crops in a field and you have added water for the first time. That time to last watering before harvesting. After 6 months, suppose all the foods are grown and it is ready to harvest and you have given some last watering, that is your base period. Okay. Okay, I will continue in the next class. Next class after 10 minutes you join. Okay. All of you join again after 10 minutes.